Mouse is
Wild
sensitive.
card factor, okay.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, everybody. Right, my primary aim of this part of the talk really is to tell you how we use Opening Minds at Redbridge Community School and how we feel it works for us. And also how we've adapted it and how we've attempted to try and take a whole school approach with the ethos of Opening Minds. Okay, so the real important thing to understand, first of all, it's not a bespoke curriculum. It's just not something that you buy in forms of textbook assessments and a teacher's edition where you can monitor the progress of the students right the way through. Okay, it really is something that is an ethos. It's a way of thinking about how to develop students' skills and competencies, and obviously how to get them to understand about their learning. And the reason I say it's not bespoke is because it's taken us a very long time at Redbridge to try and develop this curriculum to something that we feel is now working in a very successful way. And you would find also that you have to really tap into what your independent student needs are at your school and what the catchment area is like as to what sort of content you put into it and how you deliver the curriculum. Okay, the key thing that we use it for at Redbridge is or the key ethos behind it is that it is designed to improve achievement of all the students. It's designed to improve their self-esteem because we've got a firm belief that if the students' self-esteem is being improved, then obviously their attainment in class will improve also. But also, more importantly than I think everything at all, is that they need to understand that there is an enjoyment in learning and that every student should be enjoying their learning in their Opening Minds lessons. So we structure it on the guidelines from the RSA. The 5 key competencies that we use within the framework are the managing information, the managing situations relating to people, etc. You can see them on the board there. I'm not going to read them through. But if I give you a brief outline of what would be contained at Redbridge in each of these 5 key competencies, the way that we design them is that we've taken the Opening Minds competencies from the RSA, we've put it more into student speak, to make it easily understood for them to talk about their learning, and we've identified key concepts which we think will improve their learning, and then we've connected them together. So, for example, managing information, we'd be looking at how students research a project, selecting important information, making decisions based upon information, and that sort of really links into research projects and historical tasks that we do. But also, for those people that are in my workshop later on, you'll be finding how managing information is used in a slightly different way in forms of debating and arguing. Managing situations was where we look at how students can overcome difficulties, problem solving within a group, problem solving independently, but also making them work with students that they don't necessarily get along with, and how to break down barriers to learning. And then that links into relating to people, and this is clearly where we look at group working. How do you become a leader? What skills do you need to become a leader? If you're not confident, how can you build that confidence within your group? How do we make sure that we have an important input into group work as well? How do we ask questions, etc.? How do we extract information from people? And then citizenship. We use a lot of PSHE learning in this, appreciation of other cultures, art, forms of art as well, things that we look at, but also making choices to make your life and everybody else's life around you better as well. And obviously we look at behaviour within this section as well. And then we look at learning. Well, that's how do you promote learning for yourself, how can you improve your own learning, and how can you be aware of the progress that you need to make in the future. And again, those of you that are going to come into my workshop later on will have a very detailed breakdown of this. So it's a little bit about me, okay? Why do I enjoy it? And I speak for my teachers that are in my department as well. I'm a trained geography teacher. We do put a lot of geography into it because it's one of the subjects that we've kind of absorbed into Opening Minds as well as history and RE and many others. But I love it because at the end of the day, it involves things that I would do outside of my normal classroom time. It's a continual learning process for us as a team. We learn off each other, we learn off the students, we tap into what the students want to do, and we design lessons and future projects based upon what we think the students are going to want to enjoy. So we very much give the students a voice of what they've enjoyed about lessons and where they'd like to go in the future. It is more challenging for the students, but also for myself as well. It's very varied. The results you get are very varied, and you'll also find yourself teaching a particular project one way to one class, and then, for example, I know that project may not work with another class, so I'll go and teach it in a slightly different way, and then we get varied outcomes. Okay, the essential thing really was the initial freedom from the national curriculum. Okay, it's being able to sit down as a group of people and design a project that we thought would be really successful, that we want to teach to the kids, and again, that the kids will enjoy learning from. We do include aspects of history, geography, RE, PSHE, and drama, and we do make sure that we satisfy certain national curriculum areas, but at the end of the day, the emphasis is more about how the kids are learning rather than the content that we're actually getting them to learn is the key concept of working towards competencies. Again, the scheme work can be experimented with. So within my team, I will teach a lesson in one way. A teacher is teaching a different class will look at the same content, will look at what the outcomes will be, and they may feel, right, I'm going to try a totally different way. At the end of the day, the students are still learning. Again, this is where I come back to the fact that although they're getting the same content input, their competence outcomes, as it were, are going to be slightly different. And so therefore, we start to tap into what we think the students need to understand and where they need to make progress. And again, as has already been mentioned, it's a continual development project. Okay, we are always assessing what's working well, what needs to be improved, and we do this as a team. Obviously, I head that team up and I feed into the headmaster and the senior management, and we look at how we can develop for the future, how we can continually make this successful. And one area came up when we had our Ofsted inspection of 2007. Opening Minds was a key area of the creativity in the curriculum inspection, and we had two HMIs come and inspect my lesson, and they said, well, actually, have you thought about using some form of a levelling system? And I went to speak to my head. It was about just basically using Bloom's taxonomy so to give the students another concept of where they can make progress in the future. So we've put that in there, and it's working extremely well. That was then commented on by the inspection of last Christmas, and obviously they fed into the previous inspection and found that we are using Bloom's taxonomy incredibly successfully with the students, and again just gives them another area in which they can show progression. Okay, again I've already alluded to this. We share ideas, we communicate. It's very difficult because we're very much a secondary department. Everybody teaches in other departments, so we have very informal meetings where we communicate ideas, and we have a central information base where we share those ideas, and we go and watch each other's lessons as well to pick up other ideas on how to teach lessons. Okay, I'm not going to speak about that. The key ethos behind this is being able to have an impact on the future learning of the students, and this is about how they can understand about their learning and where they know how to make progress in the future. We do 6 independent learning projects as a homework across the year, and these are very much tailored towards working with their students, but working with their parents, but obviously making them into independent learners, giving them the life skills to make their own decisions, to design their own work, and take responsibility for their own projects. And the way in which we do this, we give the students a very bare outline of what we want them to achieve, and we give them an outline of how we would like it to look, and we say to them, right, this is an open-ended task. Obviously, some students are going to need more direction than others, and they get that in the form of input from myself and from the teaching assistants. But the key idea is to get them to make their own decisions, looking at the competencies, looking at what they want to achieve, and then looking at previous work and comments from the teachers and seeing how they're going to achieve it in the future. Okay. I'm going to skip through this a little bit, okay? The key thing that I've found here is that classroom management for a secondary school teacher is incredibly different when you're teaching Opening Minds. Okay, we are very much project-based. We work in large groups. I've recently just finished a project where we're working in teams of 9, 8s and 9s in the class. And for a secondary school teacher that's not normally used to doing that, you do learn a lot of new techniques, and obviously that breeds confidence into your teaching. And if you're confident and you're learning the new classroom management techniques, you're applying them, then again, that's only going to have a positive impact on the students' progress. Obviously, if we are taking aspects from other people's lessons, we do need to have a very good communication within the school. And one of the initial things that I did when I took over as the head of Opening Minds was to go and visit certain areas such as the art department, the resistant materials or the textiles department, go and visit them and say, right, what key skills would you say that 11 and 12-year-old students need to have by the time they leave Year 7? How am I going to apply this? What equipment do I need? I need some input. And you communicate all the time to make sure ultimately that people aren't having their noses put out, but primarily to make sure that your class is getting, the students are getting a quality education in your lesson time. And again, this is just a challenge for myself. This is fantastic for me because I'm doing things out of the ordinary. All right, I trained as a geography teacher, as I said, doing very prescriptive geography lessons. Within a year, I was doing clay modelling in my class, looking at how students can create an identity for themselves by using clay modelling, life-size drawing, all sorts of things that I hadn't learned at university, but things that I was willing to use. And again, they've progressed as I've moved on. And again, this is then fed into my other subject areas. And this is one of the key points that's been noted is that opening minds shouldn't just be prescribed to one year group. And I'll show you how we've tried to apply it to areas across the school. Within my geography and history and RE teaching that I take on, is that I will always now constantly be looking at how the students have achieved their levels. How have you managed to produce this project? What skills do you think you needed to do? Where do you need to make progress in the future? And because they've all gone through the Opening Minds curriculum now, we can link back to the competencies. Each student's got a set of competencies in their logbooks right the way through Year 7 through to Year 11 now. So they are referred to from within the school to keep the competencies alive, to keep the Opening Minds curriculum working throughout. And that's just one small area. I'll show you how else that happens later on. So this is the firm beliefs that I have. Okay, our school has very low literacy, very low numeracy rates when they come in. We have one of the highest adult illiteracy rates in the country. 75% of the students have some form of special needs when they come to us. And so we feel that actually competence-based learning is a clear indication for students to be able to monitor their progress, but also it allows them to have this understanding of that they can succeed in class despite the fact that they're challenged with their literacy and their numeracy. There are areas where they will succeed within a piece of group work, or they will succeed within a piece of independent work, because it's not necessarily depending on being able to do maths or to be able to read and write successfully. And again, it promotes this independence among the pupils, gives them ownership of their own projects that they can develop how they want to see. And if you come into a class now that we've had the first 6 or 7 weeks of term, you'll be able to ask the students, right, where are you going to go with this project? Well, and they can accurately break down into steps what they want to achieve. And this, again, leads back into the managing situations competence, where they are meant to have good time management and be able to plan their own work. Okay, so this is some of our facts. 10%, lowest 10% nationally for many denominators, social denominators, the very low literacy rate, as I've said, but also, which has already been mentioned, we've got this very much a downtrodden estate ethos where the parents are have very little input into the students' education. They do not really push the students at all. You can phone home and the attitude sometimes is, well, I can't make them do it. Okay, so the challenge then for us is, well, how are we going to make them do it in class? And again, leading back to the competencies and the way that we design our education at Redbridge, or also our curriculum at Redbridge, is that we try to make it as enjoyable as possible. If students are owning their curriculum, then they are then going to enjoy it a lot more, and therefore that breeds into them much more enthusiasm. Okay, so we know it's working. We have got a marked improvement in attendance since we started the Opening Minds course. We have very good attendance in Year 7, which is the key area in which we run Opening Minds. We have very much an improved behaviour log within Year 7. The number of on-call, we have an on-call system at our school where disruptive students are removed from lessons. We find that although the students were having up to 1/3 of their lessons in Opening Minds in Year 7, then the on-call ratio was down to about 5% of Year 7's on-calls were coming from Opening Minds. So there's quite a comparative figure there to show that they are actually enjoying their lessons, that they are engaged, because their behaviour is vastly improved. And we found that throughout the years that we've now got this marked application of skills. The students that you get in Year 8 and Year 9 are able to take much more ownership of their projects. They're able to talk about their learning much more confidently. And so these competence skills are being applied throughout the years. Very basically how we organise it at Redbridge, I mean, obviously secondary school curriculum is very different to primary school curriculum, but I still think there are ways in which we use it within a secondary school environment which would still be valuable, such as having block lessons together. I teach a class where I have 4 lessons in one go. That means then I can actually start a project at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then I can perhaps have it finished by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we can actually see the progression in one day from start to finish. And just to give you an idea of one of my subject outlines, okay, we look at 6 individual projects throughout the year, 6 individual titles throughout the year, half-termly titles, and the projects directly link into this. The people that are coming to see me later on will be doing this plane crash project, and we'll be looking at that in detail. That's the Ofsted inspection lesson that I did that came out as outstanding. And as you can see, we've got investigation into the world's famous explorers. Well, that's clearly looking into managing information, researching. Same with the medieval times and the Black Death, but it depends on how you want to approach those lessons. That's where you're going to look at what competencies you're going to be targeting. Living with other people, we're going to be looking at the citizenship side of things there. The plane crash project, we're going to be looking at citizenship, managing information, situations, and learning. The real cost of coffee is about fair trade and how that works. And we then look at the citizenship element there as well as the managing information. And then map skills and route planning, well, that's because we lead into a Year 7 camp where every student is taken away for 3 days to Year 7 camp in the summer. And then that's how we start to apply a lot more emotional literacy into the curriculum, and how we start to tie things together in that last week of term for this particular unit. Okay, and within this, there are distinct elements where we get the students to work together, mixed abilities, look at how they argue, look at how they debate, look how they work together, and again, constantly getting the students to monitor how each other are doing within these lessons. Okay, so this is how I assess, or how we assess as a department. Well, how do we know that these students are learning? Well, we have the competence framework to start with. We also do a self-evaluation. Every term, they have a self-evaluation to look at their confidence in certain areas of their learning. We then use that with a teacher evaluation, so we interview the students and we set targets for them to think about what competencies do you think you need to improve on, where do you think you're doing well. We always try to make it positive for them. We very much tapped into peer assessment. We get the students to talk about each other's learning within the competence framework, and then we do group assessment where we will score the groups for their work and looking at how their competence progress has been made. And oral feedback is very important as well. And we've especially found that the oral feedback is important because, as I've already mentioned, with a group of children which have very high SEN rates and very low literacy, then written feedback to them isn't always valuable, and actually getting them to write about their progress isn't always valuable, which is why we've developed this year a way of monitoring oral feedback for these students, because especially with the boys, we find that they are able to talk about their learning and their progress and the competencies they've used and where they need to develop much more successfully than they're able to write it down. Okay, so they are still getting that element of feedback and progress conversation in there. Well, this is how I'd structure my lessons typically, and this is something that we found works extremely well, and this is how I'll be structuring my task later on. We look at our activities, so what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? We then read through our competence framework, and we get the students to note down the competence they feel that they're going to be using within that particular lesson. We then obviously complete the activity, get the students to work, and that might take one lesson, it may take 2, it may take 3, but then what we then do is we come back as a group afterwards and then we assess the competencies and we get the students to actively talk about where they feel they've used the competence, how they think they've developed their skills, and where they think they need to go next. And we can do that individually as well as within groups. Again, that comes down as oral feedback, but obviously for the purpose of monitoring, we do require the students to have some form of written feedback as well. And again, that goes through one-to-one consultations. And that's the beauty really of having a lot of contact time with these students and having 3 lessons together, because it means you can actually have groups of students working on a task and on a project. At the same time, you can pull 1 or 2 students aside and you can have your one-to-one conversations with them while all the others are working at the same time. And that gradually you work through, you get through their progress books. Okay, one area which we've developed this into the whole school. Every single classroom at Redbridge now has this assessment criteria on the wall, something that Ofsted were very keen on actually, and this feeds back into our competence conversations. What have I learnt? How have I learnt it? All of these things are used as a plenary to get the students more aware of the progress they're making. And obviously this, what will I need to do next and where am I going next, is giving them ownership of their own projects and how they should be designing their work for the future. Again, I've just actually discussed about that, so I'll move on. Okay, something that I was asked to do at Chichester University was talk about metacognition and how the students are sort of understanding how they're learning. The key element here is that the students at Redbridge, if you look at point 3, are very, very confident at talking to strangers, talking to teachers that come in. I've had several teachers, head teachers from the local schools who are thinking of applying Opening Minds or have just started it and are looking for some advice and guidance or simply just to discuss how to take it forwards. The students are extremely confident with talking to people about their learning, about the competence framework, and that is obviously core to the whole ethos of Opening Minds, that the students must be able to talk about the competence framework, otherwise, the whole idea is lost on them. And the constant progression is key. They will always be finding new areas in which they wish to develop. If you're giving them the ownership of their learning, they will identify areas alongside the guidance of the adult members of staff and their peers. They will find out where their progression needs to take place. Okay. We have several initiatives that Opening Minds have bred at Redbridge School, and actually there's a couple more that aren't actually mentioned on here. We have something very much called the PIT ethos, and this is something that came out of Opening Minds and was then bred into the entire school, and is another learning post that every single classroom would have. We firmly believe that if you take the students out of their comfort zone, as in put them into the pit, give them the tools to get out of it, but not actually tell them how to do it, then their learning and their progression will be far more accelerated. And we now use that as a basis for every single curriculum subject at Redbridge. My geography lessons, my history lessons, we very much put them into the pit and get them to get themselves out of it, either by themselves or by working with other people. And that's just one very small area in which the competence framework has been used as a whole school priority. We very much, as I said, it's very much the ethos of the school. This in turn has developed teaching skills of everybody at Redbridge School as well, and the competencies are monitored within mentoring sessions that tutors have with their students throughout the year. So at different times of the year we will mentor students. We have a mixture of year 7s and to year 11s within our tutor groups. We find that works very well, but we monitor the competencies they're using throughout the year as well. Another area in which we developed that, though, is where we were looking at enrichment weeks. We found that actually, financially, the enrichment weeks were not viable for the school anymore. We've actually taken Wednesday afternoons, double period, is now what we call a major-minor session for Year 8. We're trialling that with Year 8. Very much a competence-based period where we're just doing enrichment education. I'm running something called See the World. It's very much a travel and tourism-based piece of work. Students working in small groups. I've only got a group of 14, so we can actually do some really quite experimental stuff with them, some really interesting things. But again, we look at what skills, and this is more centred on life skills than learning skills. So we're looking at how they could apply the skills to the workplace. What skills have they used, which are going to help them later on in the school. And we give them ownership of tasks, such as for my group, we'll have 2 groups. One of them will be the recorder. They have to take the photographs of the group at work. They have to record what they're all doing. And again, that's just one area which we're trialling. It's very successful. It will be carried on to Year 9. Year 8s will start it next year. And then it's all about giving these students life skills and work-based skills for the future. And really, just to finally finish here today, the whole tying back to our ethos of the school is a self-improvement and development of their self-improvement and development of their self-esteem. We make it clear to them from a very early age that we're not going to do everything for them. The key question we've got is, how do I do this? My answer to that would be, why don't you ask your mate next year? Okay, and get the students to teach each other. And obviously there's fantastic fact that you only really remember 10% of what you're taught, but you remember 90% of what you teach. Okay, so we very much try to build that into the students. We try to break away from this estate mentality, the whole idea of that he was doing it as well, or it's not just my fault, but actually get the students to take ownership of themselves. And we start, if they've taken ownership of their learning, they can take ownership of their behaviour as well. And this is why we're finding that behaviour is far more improved at Redbridge since we've started doing the Opening Minds course. Put an end to the spoon feeding of students information, make them work things out for themselves. And again, finally, if they're going to improve their self-esteem, if they're going to improve their progression, their knowledge of where their knowledge of understanding and where they need to improve, obviously the final thing is to improve their organisation. If they can give themselves the tools to learn with, then it makes everything else so much easier for them. Okay, thank you very much, and well done.